case of Anna Maria Wilson. In May 2022, the cycling community was shocked by the shocking murder of rising star Anna. This is the result of jealousy, betrayal, and obsession. At the heart of the case was a volatile love triangle, her affair with Colin Strickland and his girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong. What really happened that night in Austin, Texas, and what drove Anna to her tragic end? The case remains a chilling exploration of human emotions and how they can lead to acts of cruelty. From Anna's tragedy to the dramatic international manhunt, the case not only left a lasting impression, but also raised urgent questions about trust and justice. Anna Maria Wilson was born on May 18, 1996 in Little Tony, New Hampshire. Her mother, Karen Wilson, was a cycling instructor, and her father, Eric Wilson, was a member of the U.S. ski team in 1977. With such parents, she was destined to make a career as an athlete. The family moved to Kirby, Vermont, a picturesque area with large mountains, ski resorts, and first-class preparatory schools specializing in training young athletes. Her father worked as a ski racing instructor at Burke Mountain Academy. At a young age, both Anna and her brother Matthew Wilson attended college where their father worked. Both were already experienced skiers, much to the delight of their parents, especially Anna. She seemed to have inherited the sporting genes passed on to her by her parents. She was not only a talented skier, but also captain of football team and a promising gravel racer. This was where her passion lay. For a short period of time, she not only participated in competitions, but also won races with amazing speed. Unfortunately, her bright future was destined to be cut short. On May 11, 2022, at about 10 p.m. in Austin, Texas, during a friend's 25th birthday celebration, Anna was found bleeding from her head, unconscious, and not breathing in the bathroom. It was not a freak accident nor an attempt to harm herself. She had been attacked twice in the head and once in the chest. In complete shock, her friend immediately called 911, trying to save Anna's life. First responders arrived on the scene as quickly as they could and immediately began performing CPR. But it wasn't long before they gave up. It was too late. Anna's fight for life was over. But what happened? What drove the attacker to so brutally take her life? Let's go back in time. In 2019, Anna graduated from Dortmund University with a degree in engineering. However, she wasn't planning on making a career as an engineer. She dreamed with all her heart of proving herself in sports. Within 2 years, she became a famous cyclist, rising up the rankings and sharing podiums with already established professional cyclists. She used to work at a company, but she soon quit to devote herself to cycling. Her career path consisted solely of training and competing. Anna became more famous and began to integrate more into the community of athletes and cyclists. She had many friends and new sponsors. One such person was Colin Strickland, a 30-year-old experienced cyclist. He had a common sponsor with Anna. In October 2021, Anna visited Austin, Texas, where Colin lived. As soon as they came out of their previous relationships, Colin and Anna entered into a short-lived relationship. After, Anna returned to her home in California. Meanwhile, Colin got back together with Caitlin Armstrong, with whom he had previously dated. Caitlin, a 34-year-old yoga instructor and realtor. There was no animosity between Anna and Colin after their breakup. They remained friends and active members of the cycling community. However, a problem arose. Caitlin did not like Colin's continued communication with Anna. Although she was unaware of their previous involvement, Caitlin could not understand that their relationship was strictly platonic and professional. She began to take steps to prevent them from communicating with each other, blocking calls and deleting messages from Anna on Colin's phone. Colin did not want to part with Caitlin, fearing he would lose her. In an effort to ease the situation and in a strange way calm Caitlin down, he saved Anna's number in his phone under a different name. Perhaps he couldn't think of anything else, but it wasn't the smartest move on Colin's part. In January 2022, Anna and Colin took part in a cycling competition in Arkansas, and Caitlin accompanied them. This led to an awkward situation. Anna seemed unaware of the issues her friendship with Colin was causing. Although there was no overt conflict, the atmosphere was tense. The day after the event, Anna texted Colin asking what was happening between them. She mentioned that if Colin preferred to stay just friends, she was okay with that, but they needed to discuss it. From Anna's message, it appeared she was uncertain about their relationship, at least from her end. Things became even more complicated when Caitlin learned that Anna and Colin had a romantic history. Caitlin's friends said that she was extremely angry, with some saying she even threatened Anna, claiming she would kill Anna. While such statements can be exaggerated in emotional moments and may not indicate actual intent, Caitlin felt her concerns were valid. Colin communicated with Anna during training, spent a lot of time with her at cycling competitions, and talked with her frequently. Since Caitlin was aware of their past relationship, she changed how she viewed the situation. To her, it seemed clear that Colin was cheating on her. This suspicion is further reinforced when she discovers that Colin has been hiding his messages with Anna under a fake name on his phone. Although Caitlin could have reacted impulsively, she remained composed and took months to process everything. On May 10th, Anna returned to Austin for a bike ride called Gravel Locomotives and then stayed with a friend. Colin was also on the trip. He planned to go swimming with Anna on May 11th at 5:30 p.m. He misled Caitlin about his plans that evening. He picked up Anna from her friend's house and they went swimming in a deep pool with a whirlpool as planned. After swimming, Colin and Anna had dinner at a poolside restaurant. He then dropped Anna off at her friend's house at 8:37 p.m. Colin sent Caitlin a text saying he had been asked to deliver flowers to a friend's house and was on his way home. He didn't wait for Anna to get home safely, assuming she would be fine. Just as Colin texted Caitlin, Anna's friend's doorbell rang, confirming her arrival. Of course, Caitlin didn't believe Colin's explanation about flower delivery. Curious about what Colin was really up to, Caitlin used a special app on her phone to track his location. She also found out where Anna was using the same app. This program is typically used for planning exercise routes, which can be shared and compared with other users. Additionally, it allows real-time tracking of someone's location, such as during a run or bike ride, or even to check on a partner suspected of cheating. At 8:37 p.m. that evening, Anna arrived at her friend's house to attend a birthday party. Around 10 p.m., her friend called 911 after finding Anna seriously injured from a brutal attack. The police immediately investigated this murder. Complicating the situation, the victim was from out of town. The police's first priority was to identify anyone in the area who knew Anna, and they quickly found leads. They asked Anna's friend if anything had been stolen, but there were no obvious signs of a burglary. The only notable thing missing was Anna's bicycle, which the police later discovered abandoned in some bushes nearby. The bike is quite valuable to a professional cyclist. However, if it was a burglary, why didn't the thief take the bicycle with him since nothing else was missing from the house? The police quickly concluded that the incident was not a failed burglary. Instead, it appears that the perpetrator had a personal grudge against the victim. Anna's friend, who had called 911, she was devastated by Anna's death, showed no signs of involvement, so the police ruled her out as a suspect. The investigation then turned to Anna's acquaintances in the area, specifically Colin and Caitlin. The police found out that Caitlin had a Class B warrant for her arrest. While this warrant was not for a serious crime, it was related to fraud. Known, Caitlin had previously gone to a Botox clinic and, when it was time to pay, told the staff that her credit card was in her car. She left to get her credit card, but never returned. The fraud was minor, totaling only $600, but it provided the police with a reason to bring Caitlin in for questioning about Anna's murder. Officer Wilson immediately believed that it was time for Caitlin to pay for her actions. She did not deny her wrongdoing, as she likely faced only a minor penalty, such as an apology and a fine. Caitlin's behavior changed dramatically when the police first asked her about her activities over the last 24 hours and then inquired about Anna. When the mention of murder came up, her expression fell, and she sat frozen, clearly confused and unsure of how to respond. Despite her confusion, Caitlin attempted to explain her whereabouts, but her story was unconvincing. The investigator noted that Anna's friend had a doorbell camera and security cameras around her house. One camera focuses on the front of the house, capturing part of the sidewalk and alley with the view of passing cars and people. This footage became crucial. It showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee passing the house on May 11th, the same night Anna was killed. Caitlin was the one driving that vehicle. The police asked Caitlin to explain why she was in the area, but she couldn't provide a reason. She sat quietly, looking upset with her arms crossed, avoiding eye contact and rolling her eyes. Meanwhile, the police were speaking with Colin, who shared the entire story about his friendship with Anna and the complications that arose with Caitlin. The detectives described the situation as a love triangle involving Colin, Caitlin, and Anna. She had no alibi, but on the other hand, the police had made an administrative error in the arrest warrant. And what was worse, the police database had her date of birth incorrect. Because of this mistake, Caitlin was released. After leaving the police station, Caitlin quickly took action. She didn't want to wait for the police to show up at her door again, which she was sure would happen pretty soon. Caitlin booked a flight from Chile to New York, deleted all her social media accounts, and vanished. If someone wants to disappear, the vast and varied landscapes of the United States are ideal for that. New York, with its massive urban environment, offers the perfect cover. Any police search in such a large city would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. On May 14th at 12:30, Caitlin was seen on surveillance camera entering Austin International Airport. From there, she took a connecting flight to Houston and then transferred to another flight to LaGuardia Airport in New York. On May 17th, U.S. Marshals obtained a warrant for Caitlin Armstrong's arrest, which they had previously failed to execute. Very soon after that, on May 18th, she was spotted at LaGuardia Airport. However, Caitlin was using smaller, shorter domestic flights to evade law enforcement, successfully staying one step ahead of the police. On the day she arrived in New York, she obtained an ID under the name Christine Armstrong, which was her sister's name. At the time, not much was known about this sister. The authorities believed that Christine did not live in New York, but was, in fact, in California. Getting an ID was a risky decision for Caitlin. The authorities now knew she was in New York, and the ID was linked to a relative with the same her last name. It was highly unlikely that her sister, who supposedly lived in California, would suddenly move to New York at the same time Caitlin was on the run. The police eventually obtained a copy of the ID issued to Caitlin, which listed her address as Camp Haven, a recreational area in Livingston Estate, New York. It has been 6 weeks since the search began, but there have been no leads. Colin also went into hiding, fearing that after he spoke out, Caitlin would return and harm him. Caitlin's sister, Tina Armstrong, also sought refuge. She avoided the media and never commented publicly about Caitlin. At this moment, Caitlin continued to evade contact with authorities, and the theory that she might be hiding at Camp Haven was eliminated. After many efforts, on June 29, 2022, U.S. federal agents and Costa Rican police surrounded the San Teresa nursing home. A joint task force entered the facility and quickly emerged with a woman dressed in black, her nose bandaged. She did not look at all like the pretty Caitlin who had long, lush red hair and bright eyes, but it was Caitlin. Authorities finally captured her. They discovered that Caitlin had left the U.S. via New York Airport on May 18th at 8 p.m. using a fake passport. She had never been to Camp Haven. Instead, her strategy involved taking different flights to mislead the police, which worked perfectly. While the police searched New York, she arrived in San Jose, Costa Rica. Since Caitlin's arrest, many rumors and theories have emerged. A significant question is whether she acted alone or had accomplices. She led a comfortable life as a yoga instructor and realtor, but she was not wealthy. In under 50 days, she managed to book and pay for multiple flights within the U.S. and an international flight to Costa Rica. The bruises and bandages on her face indicate she likely underwent plastic surgery soon after arriving in Costa Rica. And this is expensive. Eventually, police discovered her black Jeep at a local car dealership. On May 13th, Caitlin sold the car for $12,200. This partly explains why she is able to cover her expenses. However, $12,200 is not a substantial amount when trying to stay hidden, and it's doubtful it covered all her travel costs, living expenses, and surgery. Suspicion has shifted to her sister, Christine. It's important to note that this is just a theory and not confirmed, as there is no definitive evidence about anyone's involvement, including that of her sister. The day after Caitlin arrived in New York, she obtained an ID using Christine's name, and when she was arrested, she had a copy of Christine's driver's license with her. Meanwhile, the day after Caitlin's arrival, Christine applied for a new driver's license, claiming hers was lost. Did she assist Caitlin in evading the authorities? There is no answer to this question yet. Another possibility is that Colin may have played a significant role in the case. Some people suspect a conspiracy involving Colin and Caitlin. They believe that Colin's text to Caitlin, sent just after he dropped Anna off at her friend's house, claiming he was delivering flowers, was actually a secret message about Anna's location. There is no evidence to support this theory. It remains speculation. Nonetheless, Colin has a questionable history of honesty. He concealed his relationship with Anna and changed her name in his phone to prevent Caitlin from discovering the truth. He also told the police that he and Caitlin had broken up before Anna arrived in town and that Caitlin was fine with him dating others. If that was the case, why did he text Caitlin about his whereabouts, and why was she upset about Anna and Colin's friendship? Since Caitlin's arrest, police have been working hard to gather evidence. One key piece is ballistic evidence linked to a 9mm weapon that was purchased by Colin, not Caitlin. A man gave this weapon to her in January 2022, and investigators found it in her home. Detectives are also looking into the possibility that someone from another country helped Caitlin. After her deportation, law enforcement held a press conference discussing how quickly she managed to escape and catch multiple flights between airports. Additionally, she possessed a passport that did not belong to her. On July 21, 2022, she participated in her first online trial, where she pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. In October 2022, she attended a second hearing to determine if she could be released while waiting for a jury trial. Various options were discussed, but Caitlin remained confident that she would confront a grand jury regarding the murder charges, insisting on her innocence. She will stay in the Travis County Jail until her trial. According to her lawyer, prosecutors are hesitant to take the case to trial, citing a lack of evidence for a conviction. The defense argues that the officers involved were inexperienced and did not properly act on information about Caitlin's ex-boyfriend. They also pointed out that Caitlin's and Colin's home was vandalized the night Anna was killed, questioning why this was not investigated thoroughly and who may have been responsible for the crime. The defense is arguing that the police were incompetent in their investigation. They believe law enforcement is trying to cover up mistakes and misconduct related to the case. The court hearing was scheduled for a week after the bail hearing, but the defense has since filed a motion to suppress evidence obtained by police, claiming that Caitlin was not read her rights. They argue that this invalidates the evidence, including her initial arrest tied to a Botox clinic. As a result, the judge has paused the trial while considering these motions, and a new pretrial date is set for June 22, 2023, although it has not yet been fully confirmed. A few months later, Caitlin Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison for the murder of Anna Mariah Wilson. The sentence was handed down on November 17, 2023, after she was convicted by a Texas jury the day before. Caitlin was convicted of attacking Anna 3 times in May 2022, motivated by jealousy over Anna's previous relationship with her boyfriend, Colin. Anna, a rising star in the professional cycling scene, was shot and killed in Austin, Texas. Investigation reveals disturbing links between Caitlin Armstrong, Colin, and Anna. Caitlin's jealousy led her to commit murder. Her trial ended in November 2023, resulting in a guilty verdict and a 90-year prison sentence. Although the case has been closed, the details surrounding Anna's death continue to cause debate. Kathy Blair was born on May 31, 1961, in California. She grew up in a loving family with her parents, a brother, and a sister. From an early age, she had a deep passion for the arts, but music was what she loved the most. Singing was more than just a hobby. It was her true passion. So, when it was time to choose a career, Kathy didn't have to think twice. She knew exactly what she wanted. She enrolled at the University of Texas to study vocal performance and moved to Austin. After graduating, she became a music teacher and a Christian choir instructor. She absolutely loved her job, and her students adored her. They could see how much heart she put into music, and her passion was contagious. Over the years, Kathy was married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter, whom she raised on her own. In 2013, when she was 52, Kathy moved into a new home in a quiet, safe suburb of Austin. She had been dreaming of a place that checked all her boxes, and she had finally found the perfect one. By then, her children were grown and living on their own, while Kathy continued her work in music and led the choir. In December 2014, her son Joe came to stay with her for a few weeks. He was 23 and serving in the military. Before his next deployment, he wanted to spend some time at home with his mom. On December 5th, Joe went out to meet some friends and didn't return home until almost noon the next day. As he walked into the house, he called out for his mom, but there was only silence. Feeling uneasy, he started checking the rooms one by one until he reached Kathy's bedroom. What he saw there was horrifying. She was lying on the floor next to her bed, surrounded by a pool of blood. Joe knew immediately she was gone. Panicked, he ran outside and called the police. When investigators got there, they quickly confirmed that Kathy had been dead for several hours, and from the sheer amount of blood at the scene, it was clear this wasn't an accident. This was murder. While the medical experts examined the body, police officers began processing the crime scene. One of the first things they noticed was that the drawers from a large jewelry box in her bedroom had been pulled out and were scattered on the floor. It looked like the killer had taken some of Kathy's jewelry, leading detectives to consider robbery as the primary motive. But something about that theory felt off. For one, the intruder hadn't taken anything else. Valuable items like Kathy's laptop, phone, and other expensive things were left untouched, right out in the open. The house wasn't ransacked, and there was no sign that the killer had searched for anything beyond the jewelry. Then there was the timing. Break-ins at night were pretty uncommon. Most burglars preferred to strike during the day when homeowners were at work. On top of that, this particular neighborhood was considered one of the safest in the city. Crimes like this just didn't happen there. Another strange detail was the sequence of events. It seemed like the killer had murdered Kathy first and only then started searching for valuables. Blood stains on the jewelry box drawers and other parts of the bedroom suggested that the attack happened before the so-called robbery began. That meant the intruder must have attacked Kathy the moment they stepped into her bedroom. Adding to the mystery, there were no signs of forced entry at the front door, although investigators found that the back door had been left unlocked. When they asked Joe about it, he explained that his mother often left that door open. With all this in mind, detectives started to wonder, was this really a robbery or just a cover-up? What if the killer had planned to murder Kathy all along? And if that was the case, it raised an even more chilling question. Could the person responsible have known her? And if so, did they also know about that unlocked back door? Despite their best efforts, forensic experts couldn't find any evidence that might lead them to the killer. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing that could identify the person responsible. The only clue they managed to recover was a partial shoe print in Kathy's bedroom, left behind in her blood. The medical examiners determined that Kathy had died from multiple stab wounds and also showed signs of strangulation. However, there was no evidence of sexual assault, which only reinforced the detective's suspicion that this wasn't a random crime. It seemed personal. With no physical evidence to go on, police shifted their focus to Kathy's inner circle, looking for anyone who might have had a reason to harm her. Naturally, they started with her son, since he theoretically had the opportunity to commit the crime. But after checking his alibi, detectives quickly ruled him out. He had spent the entire night with friends, and his whereabouts were confirmed. Next, they spoke with Kathy's friends and co-workers, hoping to uncover any conflicts or grudges. But according to everyone they interviewed, she had no enemies. She was well-liked, never got into fights, and devoted most of her time to the choir. Just when it seemed like they had hit a dead end, detectives came across a lead. Several of Kathy's close friends mentioned that she had frequently talked about her second ex-husband, the man she had divorced 4 years before the murder. According to Kathy, their breakup had been anything but smooth. Her ex-husband wouldn't leave her alone and kept showing up, refusing to let go. At one point, she even told friends she was worried for her safety and asked them not to tell him where she had moved. Detectives tracked the man down and discovered he was living not far from Austin. When they went to speak with him, his reaction immediately raised red flags. The moment they mentioned Kathy's death, his first response was she shot? That struck them as odd. Why would he assume she had been shot, rather than stabbed or killed some other way? When asked about his whereabouts that night, he claimed he had been staying in his RV for a short getaway. He even let detectives search it without a warrant, but despite their suspicions, they found nothing. No weapons, no blood, no signs that he had anything to do with the crime. Without any concrete evidence, they couldn't pin anything on him. He remained on their radar, but with no real leads, detectives had no choice but to keep looking for other suspects. A few days later, detectives received an unexpected call from one of Kathy's friends, who had something strange to share. She and a few others had organized a memorial service in Kathy's honor, and during the ceremony, a man they didn't recognize stood up to give a speech. From the very first words out of his mouth, something felt off. His tone, his mannerisms, everything about him made the guests uneasy. But the strangest part was that no one there knew who he was. These were Kathy's closest friends, yet not a single one of them had ever seen this man before. And as he spoke, it became clear that he hadn't actually known Kathy either. His words didn't match reality, almost as if he was making things up on the spot. Curious, detectives asked around, and one of Kathy's friends finally recognized him. He had seen the man before. He worked as a sales clerk at a local women's clothing store. Police tracked this person down and questioned him. The man admitted he had never met Kathy. He said he had read about her murder in the news, felt sad, and decided to attend the memorial. His explanation was pretty weird, but there was no real evidence linking him to the crime. So, with nothing to hold him on, detectives had to move on, still searching for their killer. For several days, the case remained at a standstill until an unexpected twist changed everything. A man named Rob called the police, saying he had something they might want to see. According to his story, he had recently bought a new scope for his hunting rifle. This wasn't just any scope. It was equipped with a thermal imaging camera. Excited to test it out, he decided to take a walk in the early hours of December 6th, heading toward a wooded area near the edge of his neighborhood. As he walked, a car slowly drove past him before pulling over to the side of the road. A few seconds later, a man stepped out and headed down one of the nearby streets, disappearing into the night. At the time, Rob didn't think much of it, but later, when he saw the news about Kathy's murder, something clicked. The man he saw had been walking in the direction of her house. That's when he remembered his thermal camera had been recording the entire time. He went back and reviewed the footage, and there it was. The man, clearly visible, walking away from his car. Detectives were intrigued by the footage, but there was one major problem. It was recorded using thermal imaging, which meant it only captured the suspect's silhouette, so identifying him based on that alone would be nearly impossible. Still, the video provided some valuable clues. The man appeared to be tall, broad-shouldered, and had a distinct way of walking, and more importantly, the camera had also captured his car. Investigators hoped they could at least narrow down a list of possible vehicle models from the footage. They compared the man's height and build to their two main suspects, Kathy's ex-husband and the strange man from the memorial, but neither of them matched the silhouette in the recording. Their cars didn't match either. This only deepened detectives' doubts about both men's involvement, effectively bringing them back to square one. Over the next few days, they kept analyzing the footage, trying to extract any useful details, while also searching for new potential suspects. But despite their efforts, nothing substantial came from it. The case, once again, was at a frustrating standstill. Then, on December 15th, everything changed. That morning, police received a call from a caretaker who had gone to check on an elderly couple, Billy and Sydney Shelton. As she approached their house, she immediately noticed something was wrong. The front door was wide open, and there were clear signs of a forced entry near the lock. Stepping inside, she made her way to the bedroom, and what she saw was horrifying. The couple was lying in a pool of blood, their bodies motionless. Without hesitation, she called the police. Medical examiners later confirmed that both victims had suffered multiple stab wounds, just like Kathy. Meanwhile, detectives noticed a chilling detail. The drawers of their jewelry box had been pulled out and scattered around the room, with all the jewelry missing. But just like in Kathy's case, nothing else of value had been taken. Detectives couldn't ignore the striking similarities between this crime and Kathy's murder. From the very beginning, they considered the possibility that the same person was responsible. The victims lived just 15 minutes apart. Both attacks happened at night while the victims were sleeping, and in both cases, the killer emptied their jewelry boxes but took nothing else of value. From the beginning, investigators had believed Kathy's murder might have been personal, committed by someone she knew. But now they had to reconsider everything. What if this wasn't about revenge or a personal grudge? What if the killer was choosing victims at random based on some unknown pattern? Detectives looked for any connection between Kathy and the Sheltons' mutual friends, places they might have visited, anything that could link them. But there was nothing. Their lives had never crossed. That led to one chilling realization. They might be dealing with a serial killer. Now, this wasn't just about solving a murder. It was a race against time before he struck again. Police began re-interviewing everyone connected to the victims, hoping that someone would remember even the smallest detail that could lead them to the killer. They urged people to share anything, no matter how insignificant it might seem. And eventually, that approach paid off. One of Kathy's friends recalled a conversation they had a few months before her murder. Kathy had mentioned a disturbing encounter with a handyman who had been hired by her landlord to do some repairs on the house. She told her that the job had been done poorly, but more than that, something about the man's behavior had unsettled her. Detectives contacted the landlord, who was able to track down the worker's contact information. It was a local resident named Timothy Parlins. The first thing detectives discovered was that Timothy's brother worked at the church regularly attended by the Sheltons, and Timothy himself had also been seen there. Then they dug into his background and found something even more concerning. Timothy had a long rap sheet. He had been arrested multiple times for theft, and his targets were almost always jewelry. At the time of the investigation, Timothy was out on parole and living in a long-stay hotel. Detectives went to see him and he agreed to answer their questions, but when they asked to come up to his room, he refused. Instead, he insisted on speaking with them outside, in the hotel parking lot. At first, Timothy claimed he didn't remember Kathy, but when detectives provided more details, he suddenly recalled doing some repairs at her house. He insisted he had nothing to do with her murder and even said he had an alibi. He had been working the night shift at a convenience store when Kathy was killed. As they spoke, detectives couldn't help but notice that Timothy didn't seem to match the silhouette from the thermal camera footage. He was significantly shorter than the man in the video, and his car didn't resemble the one seen that night. So, with no solid evidence against him, they left empty-handed. But then, something unexpected happened. When they called Timothy's employer to verify his alibi, they learned that he had been fired a week before Kathy's murder. So there was no way he could have been working that night. Detectives immediately rushed back to the hotel, but Timothy was already gone. Instead, his wife answered the door and allowed them to search their room. That's when they finally caught a break. Inside, they found a pawn shop receipt showing that Timothy had sold several pieces of jewelry, and the date on the receipt was the same day Kathy was murdered. Detectives went straight to the pawn shop and quickly confirmed that the jewelry Timothy had sold belonged to Kathy. But that wasn't all. The shop's security cameras had captured footage of the parking lot, and what they saw there was even more interesting. Timothy hadn't arrived in his own car, which meant he had access to another vehicle. After running the plates, police discovered that the vehicle belonged to his sister, and that was a crucial detail because the car looked almost identical to the one caught on the thermal camera on the night of Kathy's murder. That was enough for detectives to secure a warrant to search the vehicle. As soon as forensic experts started examining the car, they found traces of blood on the front seat and the floor. When the lab results came back, they confirmed the worst. It was Kathy's blood. Right after that, police arrested Timothy and brought him in for questioning. But even when confronted with all the evidence, he refused to admit anything. Instead, he kept repeating the same phrase over and over. "These hands have never killed anyone." Detectives interrogated Timothy for hours, pressing him on the evidence against him, and eventually he cracked, but not in the way they expected. He continued to insist that he hadn't killed anyone, but now claimed to know who did. According to him, the real murderer was a man named Sean. Naturally, investigators were skeptical. The case against Timothy was quite strong, and the sudden shift in blame felt like a desperate attempt to escape justice. Still, they decided to check out Sean just in case. Nothing about what they found screamed murderer. Sean Gant Benicasser, 30, was a former science teacher with a degree in microbiology, and he had no criminal record. On top of that, he lived several hundred miles from Austin, making his involvement seem even less likely. Still, detectives needed to be 100% sure, so they traveled to his town to question him. Sean admitted that he had met Timothy a few months prior and found him to be a shady character. They hadn't spoken much since, but a few minutes later he said something quite weird. He had actually been in Austin on the nights of both murders. Even more interesting, he revealed that he had stayed at Timothy's place during that time. The situation only grew more confusing from there. At first, Sean claimed that on the night of Kathy's murder, Timothy had left the house without saying a word, but just minutes later, he suddenly changed his story. Now, he admitted that they had actually gone to Kathy's house together. According to him, Timothy got out of the car and returned a few minutes later, carrying a blood-stained bag. Later, when Sean peeked inside, he saw some jewelry. That's when he realized Timothy had done something terrible. But he insisted he had no idea what was going to happen and had never planned to be part of any crime. As detectives continued questioning him, Sean asked to use the restroom, and they let him step out. One of the investigators watched as he walked away, and that's when something clicked. His stride, his posture, his movement. It all looked eerily similar to the silhouette captured on the thermal camera the night Kathy was murdered. That raised a serious question. Detectives were no longer sure he was telling the truth. Now, they strongly suspected that Sean was the real killer. But without a confession, they had nothing solid to build a case against him. With Timothy, at least they had some physical evidence tying him to the crime. But with Sean, they had absolutely nothing. When he returned from the restroom, they kept pressing him, challenging his version of events. They told him they didn't believe he had stayed in the car and suggested that maybe Timothy had forced him into Kathy's house, threatening him in some way. It was a calculated move, and it worked. Sean hesitated, then finally admitted that he had entered the house alone. According to him, he had gone inside only to steal valuables while Timothy waited outside. He said he slipped in through the unlocked back door and started looking through the rooms for anything worth taking. When he reached Kathy's bedroom, he saw the jewelry box, and Kathy still asleep in bed. Sean initially stuck to his story. He claimed he had carefully taken the valuables and left without harming Kathy. He even suggested that Timothy might have returned to the house after the robbery and committed the murder for reasons unknown to him, but detectives weren't buying it. They knew that blood had been found on the jewelry box, meaning the killer had only taken the valuables after the murder, which contradicted Sean's version completely. They kept pressing him, breaking down his lies piece by piece, and finally he cracked. Sean admitted that he had killed Kathy. According to him, as soon as he entered her bedroom, she woke up and lunged at him. Panicking, he pulled out a knife and stabbed her multiple times. Once she was dead, he grabbed the jewelry, rushed out of the house, and got back into the car. Detectives still had doubts about Sean's story. They found it hard to believe that Kathy had suddenly jumped at him and tried to grab his knife. But regardless of the details, his confession was enough to arrest him. To strengthen their case, they took his shoes and had forensic experts compare the soles to the bloody footprint found in Kathy's bedroom. It was a perfect match. However, there was still one major problem: the murder of the elderly couple. When detectives questioned Sean about it, his entire demeanor changed. He immediately asked for a lawyer and refused to say another word. With no evidence directly linking him to that crime, investigators were at a dead end. So they turned back to Timothy. He was arrested as an accomplice in Kathy's murder, and under Texas law, that meant he faced the same charges as Sean, even if he hadn't physically participated in the killing. Whether he liked it or not, he was going down with him. Timothy admitted that he had driven Sean to Kathy's house, but insisted that he had never stepped out of the car and had no idea his partner was going to kill her. However, he did confess to selling Kathy's stolen jewelry, which directly tied him to the crime. When detectives pressed him about the murder of the elderly couple, he admitted that he and Sean had gone there to rob the house as well. But just like before, he claimed that he had stayed in the car while Sean went inside. Investigators considered the possibility that Timothy was telling the truth. The thermal camera footage from Kathy's murder had clearly shown only one person exiting the vehicle. If the same pattern had been followed in the second crime, it was likely that Sean had acted alone once again. In the end, Timothy was charged in all 3 murders due to his role in the crimes, even though he hadn't committed the killings himself. As for Sean, he was officially charged with Kathy's murder, but detectives still weren't able to prove his involvement in the second case. At least not yet. The court ruled that Timothy and Sean would be tried separately. During his trial, Timothy maintained that he had no involvement in the murders and had no idea his partner was going to kill anyone. But that didn't change the fact that he had driven Sean to both crime scenes and profited from selling Kathy's stolen jewelry. In the end, the jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sean's trial, however, was much more complicated. Unlike Timothy, who was directly linked to Kathy's case by physical evidence, the case against Sean rested mostly on his confession, a shoe print in Kathy's bedroom, and the thermal camera footage. His lawyer immediately went on the attack, claiming that detectives had coerced Sean into confessing and pressured him into taking the blame for someone else's crime. He also insisted that the rest of the evidence was purely circumstantial. As a result, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, forcing the judge to declare a mistrial. But prosecutors weren't giving up, and a few months later, he was back in court for a second trial. This time, the prosecution managed to convince the jury of Sean's guilt, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for Kathy's murder. However, despite strong suspicions, he was never officially charged in the killing of the elderly couple. Investigators were certain he had committed those murders as well, but without solid evidence, they couldn't make the charges stick. In the end, while both men faced justice, there were still unanswered questions in the case. Detectives were never able to determine why Sean had killed his victims. If Kathy had really woken up while he was in the bedroom, he could have simply run away. It was pitch dark, and she wouldn't have been able to identify him. The only thing they could reasonably conclude was why Timothy had chosen Kathy as a target for the robbery. It seemed likely that he had held a grudge against her ever since she complained to her landlord about his poor quality repairs months earlier. That complaint had affected his paycheck. He may have resented her for it. Whether that resentment played a role in what ultimately happened that night, no one could say for sure. But one thing was clear. What started as a simple burglary had ended in cold-blooded murder. As for the elderly couple, detectives had no solid theories about the motive behind their murders. They considered the possibility that Timothy had interacted with them at church and that some kind of conflict had led to his resentment, just like with Kathy. But that was purely speculation. When it came to Sean, investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that he had no motive at all, that he simply wanted to kill. If that were the case, then there was every reason to believe that he would have continued murdering if he hadn't been caught. One final crucial detail about Sean's second trial was how much weight the prosecution placed on the thermal camera footage. That single piece of evidence ended up being the deciding factor in securing his conviction. If that neighbor hadn't decided to test out his new thermal scope in the middle of the night, if he hadn't happened to record the exact moment Sean left his car, the case against him might have fallen apart completely. Sean could have walked free. The case of Pamela Buckbinder. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family in Miami, Florida. As the third child in the family, he received a lot of love from his parents. They realized that he was different from his peers. However, at the age of 5, Jacob was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his family noticed that he was experiencing significant mood swings. Despite this, he was doing well in school. He created an educational smartphone app and won a competition in Miami. However, a month later, Jacob couldn't get out of bed, had no motivation to do anything, even stand up. They finally brought him to a doctor who diagnosed him with depression and anxiety. At 17, Jacob expressed that he no longer wanted to live. His parents noticed his unstable behavior and mental state, prompting them to take him to a hospital where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness involves extreme mood swings ranging from depression to emotional outbursts. Those affected feel trapped in their own thoughts. After finishing high school, Jacob enrolled in college while continuing his treatment. Throughout this time, he saw various psychiatrists who prescribed increasingly stronger medications. From the ages of 17 to 20, Jacob underwent numerous treatment courses, took 5 to 6 pills daily, and tried around 30 different medications, yet none seemed to help. By 2012, at 21 years old, Jacob was still deteriorating. His parents were deeply concerned and unsure of what steps to take next. Then, one day, a relative from New York, Pamela Buckbinder, called with an offer of help. Jacob's parents were relieved, thinking they had gotten help. However, they had no idea of the challenges that were about to come to their family. Pamela, a 43-year-old psychotherapist, lives in Chelsea, Manhattan, with her 4-year-old son, Calder. She and Jacob Nolan are cousins with a 22-year age gap. Jacob was the godfather of her son. In 2012, Pamela offered to help Jacob by inviting him to move from Florida to her apartment. While living with her, she provided him with therapy sessions and prescribed medication. In exchange for her help, Jacob took responsibility for Calder's care. Jacob trusted her completely. In one photo, Jacob is seen lying in bed with Pamela, laughing, which shows he feels comfortable and at home with her. However, it's important to note that this relationship is not just familial. Pamela is also Jacob's psychotherapist. Jacob cared deeply for Calder and treated him like a son. He wanted to set a positive example for his godson of what a real man should be like. This approach seemed to work as Jacob, who had struggled with mental illness for years, seemed to be stabilizing, joking frequently and always smiling. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, Pamela began to frequently express her frustrations with her ex-partner, Michael Weiss. Calder's father, Pamela, ended her relationship with Michael shortly after the birth of her son. Michael Weiss, 38, is a psychotherapist. On the surface, he and Pamela appear to be a happy, loving couple. However, beneath the perfect exterior, their relationship is in trouble. Both Michael and Pamela have reported domestic violence to the police. Pamela once attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass. Michael received medical treatment, stitched up the wound, and later that day, he reported the incident to the police. As a result, Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, she was soon forgiven by Michael and the couple reconciled. But a few months later, Pamela went to the police again, claiming that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. She later retracted that statement. Although they were never officially married, Michael and Pamela's relationship lasted about 4 years. After they had a son in 2008, Pamela finally ended the relationship. Their tumultuous relationship ended. But a new conflict arose, the custody battle for their son, Calder. Every day, Pamela tells Jacob about Michael in insulting words. She complained that Michael refused to pay child support and even accused him of doing bad things to their son, Calder, during his visits. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob was awakened by Pamela's gentle touch. She climbed into his bed, caressed his back, and whispered sweet nothings in his ear. She told him that Jacob was her savior. He was the best person in the world because no one understood her like he did. However, her affectionate mood quickly changed. She took a black sports bag from her closet and stuffed it with a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began to cry and told Jacob that today was the day he needed to face Michael. A diagram showing the entrance to the multi-story office building where Michael is seen patients is written on a piece of paper. Jacob stands up, grabs his bag, stuffs the diagram into his pocket, and leaves. Before leaving, he washes his face and declares, "Today is the day our lives will change for the better because Michael will be eliminated." Jacob arrived at the right high-rise in Manhattan. He circled the building, observing it from different angles. Entering through the service entrance, he checked in on the first floor, provided his real name, and mentioned he was going to the tutoring center. He was allowed inside. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and made his way to Michael's office. He heard a patient inside and decided to wait in the hallway for the appointment to finish. Soon, the patient would exit, leaving Michael alone. While waiting, Jacob felt increasingly anxious. Doubts flooded his mind, making him question whether he was making the right decisions. At one point, he thought about abandoning everything and running home. However, the idea of returning to Pamela without completing her request and disappointing her was stronger than his fear. Jacob realized he had no choice but to continue. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and informed Michael that Pamela had asked him to collect financial documents for the Calders kindergarten. As Michael searched for the documents, Jacob asked to use the restroom. In the restroom, Jacob took out a knife and hid it in his pocket, then retrieved a large hammer. He exited the bathroom and approached Michael, swinging the hammer at him. Thankfully, Michael reacted quickly, ducking just in time to avoid a serious injury, though the hammer struck his shoulder. Jacob then pulled out the knife and a struggle ensued. Michael, being physically larger, quickly fought back. The people around heard Michael's cry for help. They mistakenly thought that the doctor was being attacked by an unstable mental patient. They quickly called 911 to report the incident. Before the police arrived, Jacob and Michael, feeling exhausted, sat down in the hallway. Jacob took out his phone and took a selfie, which he sent to Pamela along with a question about what he should do next. But he never received a reply. The situation made him feel very strange. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. The injured men were rushed to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, none of them had life-threatening injuries. Michael was treated and sent home the same day. Jacob's injuries were more serious and the doctors noted that he was unstable. Jacob was arrested in the hospital while he was receiving treatment. He sent a detailed message to Pamela about what had happened to him and Michael. Although she initially ignored his message, she eventually asked which hospital he was in. When Pamela arrived, she was not allowed to see Jacob, who was already handcuffed to the bed. Jacob spent 4 days in the hospital before being taken to a jail cell after his discharge. He was released on bail of $200,000 while awaiting trial. Jacob was permitted to fly from New York to his parents' home in Florida. Several weeks after the incident, Michael filed a lawsuit against Pamela, accusing her of conspiring to kill him. Michael argued that Pamela was dangerous and insisted that their son should live with him. He presented surveillance footage from a hardware store showing that the day before the attack, Pamela and Jacob had purchased a hammer together and Pamela had paid in cash. Pamela denied any involvement, saying that she had only asked Jacob to retrieve some financial documents from Michael, but had not asked Jacob to attack. Although she admitted to giving Jacob a knife, she explained that it was to protect her son Calder, since Calder's daycare was on the first floor of the building where Michael worked. Shortly thereafter, the judge transferred custody of Calder to Michael Weiss, granting him full custody and banning Pamela from contacting her son for 5 years. A few months after the incident, Jacob accused Pamela of orchestrating the attack on Michael. He claimed that Pamela meticulously planned the attack, and that she had instructed Jacob to approach Michael and hit him with a hammer. Jacob previously said that Pamela had been psychologically manipulating him. Pamela repeatedly told him that Michael was harming her son, but there was no evidence to support her claim. No one ever witnessed Michael harming Calder or saying anything negative to his son. In fact, relatives testified that Michael cared deeply for his son. Pamela was someone Jacob trusted completely and considered very close. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents were in despair. They fully supported their son and claimed that Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed that Pamela had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. Prosecutors described Jacob as a spoiled child from a wealthy family, noting that he provided 3 inconsistent accounts of the event and appeared confused. When the police first arrived at Michael's office, Jacob pointed at Michael and accused him of attacking Jacob with a knife. However, during questioning, Jacob claimed that he had never used a hammer in Michael's office. He explained that he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Michael. In his third statement, Jacob said that Michael had attacked him first. Prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence regarding the motive behind the attack on Michael. Just before the attack, Michael had purchased a $1.5 million life insurance policy, naming his son Calder as the beneficiary. However, 3 days before the attack on November 9, 2012, Michael had agreed to add Pamela as a co-beneficiary and allow her to manage Calder's money. Jacob claimed that this was the first time he had learned about the insurance policy and claimed that Pamela had never shared her financial affairs with him. During the trial, it was revealed that Jacob had purchased plastic zip ties from a hardware store in addition to the hammer found with Pamela. Jacob confirmed this and made a shocking admission. Pamela had asked him not only to kill Michael, but also to ensure he suffered before dying. She described brutal acts that Jacob was supposed to carry out. Jacob refused to inflict such extreme cruelty, but he agreed to kill Michael. Jacob mentioned that Pamela initially wanted to create a homemade weapon using an air pistol, but when they got to the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and more effective to use a hammer instead. Jacob Best's attorney focused on proving that Jacob was insane. However, proving that he was insane is quite difficult. Currently, there is no test that can reveal a person's thoughts and feelings at the time of the crime. Evaluations are usually based on interviews, police reports, medical records, and sometimes social media messages. Often, 2 different psychiatrists can give conflicting opinions, which can confuse judges and juries. Although mental illness can affect emotions, thoughts, and behavior, throughout the trial, Jacob clearly understood his actions and admitted that they were wrong and bad. He did not appear insane in court. He was handsome, articulate, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly. Pamela was not called to testify at the trial by either the prosecution or the defense. Jacob Nolan, who had a mental disorder, faced skepticism regarding his claim that Pamela was the one who initiated the attack. Before the trial, Jacob, thus lawyers, hired detectives to locate Pamela, but they were unable to find her and her apartment was empty. In March 2016, after a 2-week trial, 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was convicted of attempted murder and second-degree assault, receiving a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Jacob was very upset about his sentence, stating, "It's unfair. I'm not a danger to society." His parents regretted their decision to send him to live with their Pamela, believing it was their biggest mistake. On October 19, 2017, nearly 5 years after Michael's attack, police located Pamela in Sullivan, New York. The Manhattan District Attorney charged her with conspiracy to murder Michael Weiss. At the time of Pamela's arrest, police found her passport in Calder's birth certificate. Pamela was arrested and maintained her innocence. She hired 2 of New York's top attorneys, who claimed that the video showing her doing laundry and the video of her buying the hammer had been edited. They claimed that Pamela was a highly educated psychotherapist and would never have considered organizing a murder. In the 5 years after Jacob S., Pamela lived a normal life. She worked and rented an apartment. She did not attempt to go into hiding or flee the country, but she avoided reporters and did not comment on Jacob Best's crimes. Pamela was detained before her trial at the notorious Rikers Island prison in New York, where she spent 5 years due to legal issues. On September 7, 2022, during a pre-trial hearing, Pamela made a statement agreeing to plead guilty in return for a lighter sentence. However, a month later, she decided to withdraw her plea. Pamela's trial took place. The jury found Pamela Buckbinder guilty, and she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was read, she looked sadly at her relative, who blew her kisses. Jacob and Pamela are currently serving their sentences in separate correctional facilities in New York. Jacob is scheduled to be released in 2024, while Pamela will be released in 2027. Jacob maintains regular phone contact with his parents. He has expressed remorse for his actions and reflects on them every night. He even wishes to meet Michael Weiss in person to apologize and seek forgiveness. When Pamela is released, her son, Calder, will be 19. He is currently being raised by his biological father, Michael, who still works in Manhattan. Today we will talk about the 26-year-old case of Sharon K. Hammack, who was murdered on October 3, 1996. So who was Hammack and what happened to her? Caledonia Charter Township is a charter township in Kent County in the U.S. state of Michigan. The township was organized as a survey township in 1838. It is part of the Grand Rapids metropolitan area and is located about 10 miles southeast of the city of Grand Rapids. Now the story remains an integral part of this location, which would later unfold into a web of horrors. Sharon K. Hammack was born to Jacob and Lois Gross. She was leading a normal life. Then she got married, had 2 kids, and the couple separated due to their differences and opinions. Separation and loneliness made drugs Sharon's best friend. Sharon wanted to quit drugs as she had very little money to survive. But her addiction made her enter sex work to support her family and drug abuse. Sharon found herself in a very unfamiliar situation on a late night, October 2nd, 1996. On October 3rd, 1996, a delivery guy was covering his regular beat when he came across a body wrapped up in a carpet. He then alerted the Kent County officials. Kent County deputies reached 76th Street, southeast between Patterson and Craft Avenue in Caledonia Township, where they located a deceased female. The woman was 29 years old when this incident occurred, and her name was Sharon K. Hammack. She was sexually assaulted, strangled, stabbed twice in the head, hogtied, and dumped on the side of a highway. The assailant assaulted the victim, leaving DNA vaginally and rectally, as well as other items, including a rope that was used to hogtie the victim. Sharon was a mother of 2 and 4 months pregnant when she was killed. This murder was one of the 12 Grand Rapid murder sprees in 1994. Although the police gathered all the DNA evidence present on the victim, they couldn't find the assailant due to a lack of resources and technology. And soon this case would turn cold. A string of crimes happened on the highways connecting the U.S., Canada, and Mexico borders over the years. There were over 500 murders along the highways of these countries and over 200 possible suspects. These strings would also connect human trafficking that occurred across the states. The possibility of suspects being long-haul truck drivers was high due to the multi-jurisdictional nature of these heinous crimes. In 2006, Maryland State Police were investigating the homicide of a woman who was assaulted and stabbed to death. The assailant left DNA in that victim's body as well. The Highway Patrol has been heightened over the years due to the increasing number of crimes on the highways, and the murder was very similar to that of Sharon's. Even after increased patrol by the police, they were still not able to get their hands on the murderer until 2022. On August 16, 2022, there was a regular traffic arrest of a man named Gary Artman. When police ran a check on his ID, they found that he was arrested in 1982 for a sex crime. He spent 10 years in jail in Michigan and was released in 1992. So the Mississippi Highway Patrol put him in custody and contacted the Kent County Sheriff's Office in Michigan. They verified his DNA with the crimes that occurred on the highway. With the help of the Mississippi State Highway Patrol, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, the Forest County Sheriff's Office in Mississippi, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Alabama, the Columbia County Sheriff's Office in Florida, the Michigan State Police Crime Lab, the Kent County Prosecutor's Office, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Using IgG, they were able to check that the DNA of the perpetrator found in the Maryland case in 2006 and Sharon K. Hammack's case in 1996 was from the same person. IgG showed a family tree of that DNA sequence, which included Gary Dean Artman, and his previous record showed that he worked and lived in Michigan when Hammack was killed. Further investigations reveal that shortly before the homicide, the victim was in Ontario, California, and it was found that around the same time, Gary Dean Artman was within 20 miles of Ontario, California when he was cited by local authorities. All of these clues added up to the arrest of Gary Dean Artman after 26 years, who is now being held in the Forest County Sheriff's Office in Mississippi. The Kent County Sheriff's Office is trying to extradite Gary Dean Artman to Michigan, but the extradition is still in progress. The 26-year-old cold case is now finally solved with the help of technology and diligent police officers who never gave up on cold cases by showing trust with the families that lost a loved one. On August 18, 2022, one of Sharon's case detectives knocked on Terry Nowitzka's, Sharon's sister's door and woke her. The investigator wanted to make sure that the family learned of the arrest first. He had also gotten on the phone with one of Sharon's other sisters, Tina DeYoung. "We got him," DeYoung quoted the detective as saying as soon as she got on the phone. DeYoung was stunned. "It's just a flood of emotion," she told the police. "I'm happy, but I'm sad too." DeYoung said the news brought up the pain of losing her sister all over again, but she is grateful to the Kent County Sheriff's Department for never forgetting about her sister. Unfortunately, Sharon's parents, Jacob and Lois Gross, were both deceased before justice was served. "Mama, we got justice for her," DeYoung said Thursday night looking up toward the sky. "I'm sorry it didn't happen before the good Lord took you, but justice will be served. You can celebrate with her up there." Police had been working on an in-depth examination of the 1990 murders and spoke with Terry Nowitzka's in mid-May. "We would love to know who did this to her. It wasn't right for any of the girls who have done this to them. Just terrible," Terry said tearfully. Sharon was a loving sister, a loving daughter, and a loving mother to 2 children, and we miss her so badly. Taylor Wright was born on April 23, 1988. Friends and family described her as energetic and full of life. She was kind and empathetic, spending most of her life in North Carolina as she pursued her American dream. Taylor married Jeff Wright and later had a son named Drake. She earned a college degree and worked as an officer at the local police station, where she solved numerous crimes and was respected. To the outside world, Taylor's life seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a son, and a respected job. However, the reality was that not everything in her life was as idyllic as it appeared. Taylor's close friends knew that she smoked marijuana occasionally, but she kept it a secret. During her time in the police force, she used it to manage stress and her heavy workload. She claimed that she didn't smoke regularly, only occasionally to relax after a long day. However, Jeff found out about her secret and left with her son after their divorce. This made Taylor realize that she needed to change her life. In 2016, Taylor decided to start over and move to Pensacola, Florida, a small resort town with a population of about 52,000. She likes the warm, comfortable atmosphere here. After quitting her job, she began working as a private investigator. Armed with the knowledge and experience from her previous job, she was eager to apply her skills to help her clients. Taylor divorced her husband, but faced 2 major challenges: child custody and financial issues. Court proceedings to divide assets and child custody were ongoing. It was a complicated divorce, and despite her efforts to reach an agreement, they were unable to reach an agreement which dragged on. September 2017, frustrated by financial disputes, Taylor withdrew money from her bank account without telling Jeff. The money, which was her personal savings, was something she did not want to share with Jeff. After withdrawing the money, she gave it to a friend to keep. One of Taylor's friends, Ashley MacArthur, is the main character in this story. Taylor has known Ashley, a forensic scientist, for over a year. Although it was a relatively short period of time, they became very close, to the point where Taylor entrusted Ashley with a large sum of money. Ashley agreed to help and was supposed to deposit the money in a safe deposit box, keeping it a secret from Jeff until Taylor was ready to use it. However, she soon needed money to pay for a lawyer. When Taylor reached out to Ashley, she noticed that Ashley always had excuses for delaying the return of the money or only giving her small amounts. Ashley claimed she was having trouble withdrawing the funds or that there were issues with the bank. During this time, Taylor grew increasingly suspicious that something was wrong and worried that her money might have been spent. Despite Taylor's persistent requests for the full amount to be returned, Ashley continued to provide various excuses. On the evening of September 7, 2017, Taylor and her friend Cassandra Waller went out to dinner. Cassandra had quickly become close friends after Taylor moved to the area. Cassandra was new to the city and Taylor suggested they rent an apartment together. Cassandra, a kind teacher, agreed. Over time, they developed a strong friendship. During dinner, Taylor shared her financial concerns, especially about her friend Ashley, who she believed was intentionally delaying repayment of money. Taylor expressed concern that Ashley might have spent the money or not want to pay it back. This made Taylor very anxious and stressed because she desperately needed the money to hire a good lawyer. That evening, Cassandra comforted Taylor, reassuring her that the matter would eventually be resolved, although she also had doubts about whether the money was still there. Taylor mentioned that she had scheduled a meeting with Ashley the next day, September 8th, to go to the bank together. On the morning of September 8th, as Cassandra was getting ready for work, she said goodbye to Taylor. And on her way out of the house, she saw Ashley's sitting car in the driveway. They were finally ready to take care of their banking issues. The girls said goodbye, and Cassandra drove off to school. Later that day, Ashley called Cassandra to inform her that she and Taylor had decided not to go to the bank, opting instead to go to the farm. This confused Cassandra, as she knew Taylor was in dire need of money. The night before, Taylor had been very stressed and emotional at dinner, eager to get her financial situation sorted out. Ashley explained that she and Taylor had been discussing Taylor's struggles. Ashley suggested that horseback riding might help Taylor improve spirit, therefore them to cancel their bank trip and plan an alternative vacation. This explanation seemed strange to Cassandra, but she wished them luck anyway. However, after the call, Cassandra attempted to contact Taylor but received no response to her calls or messages. Later on, Cassandra received a text from Taylor, who said she couldn't talk at the moment but would call back later. Taylor explained that she was feeling uncertain and depressed due to her divorce and the changes in her life, and that she was going out of town for a few days. Cassandra believed her and decided to give her friend some space. A couple of days later, Cassandra reached out again, asking Taylor to return home as soon as she could. After that, she received no response. As the days passed, Cassandra tried to contact Taylor several times, but Taylor continued to ignore her calls and texts, even though some of the messages were marked as read. Taylor did not return home and all of her belongings were still intact, which made Cassandra increasingly worried about her friend's safety. Cassandra wanted to see Taylor to make sure she was okay. Their neighbor said that Taylor had used drugs in the past and that she could become withdrawn during difficult times. With the difficulties Taylor was having, Cassandra was worried that she might relapse. Cassandra was feeling anxious. A week had gone by with no news, and waiting seemed pointless. Concerned, her reached out to the police. She told the officers that something was off, as Taylor was behaving unusually and had completely disappeared without explanation. In their shared apartment, there were numerous personal items belonging to Taylor that she would have taken if she had moved. There was no valid reason for her to ignore her friends until now. Taylor had never done anything like this. After hearing Cassandra's story, the police took note of the unusual aspects of the case. The police focused on the time frame of her disappearance. Naturally, they interviewed Cassandra first, since she lived in the same house as Taylor and had a close relationship with her. Meanwhile, searches were conducted in the apartment that Cassandra shared with Taylor. In the apartment, the police found Taylor's identification, some cash, and an unloaded revolver. Cassandra explained that they kept weapons in the house for self-defense, but they had never used them. There was nothing else suspicious found, but it was evident that Taylor could not have left for an extended period without her documents, money, and belongings. Cassandra was questioned several times and she quickly felt that the police suspected her and shifted their focus to proving her innocence. Despite this, she continued to cooperate with the investigation because she wanted to find out the truth. Eventually, she was ruled out as a suspect. Police initially focused on Jeff, given their contentious divorce, which involved the division of assets in custody of their son. Jeff certainly had a strong motive to harm Taylor, but police quickly determined that he was in North Carolina at the time of her disappearance and had not left the city. He had recently remarried and was focused on building a new life with little regard for his ex-wife. Family members confirmed that despite their divorce, Jeff and Taylor remained on good terms for the sake of their 6-year-old son. Jeff was known to be non-confrontational and had never harmed Taylor. He was not even aware that she had withdrawn money and tried to conceal it. Therefore, there was no reason for him to be angry with her, prompting police to immediately eliminate him as a potential suspect. The police then decide to talk to Ashley, whom Cassandra had mentioned. Her behavior is very unusual. They bring her in for questioning, and the police quickly notice that she is even flirting with the police, which shows that she is not at all concerned about her friend's disappearance. Ashley seems to believe that Taylor is okay. She knows that Taylor has been addicted to marijuana in the past, and thinks that Taylor is not really missing but is simply indulging her addiction. Ashley speculates that after receiving some money, Taylor relapsed and went off to use. However, this explanation seems unconvincing because Ashley had previously told Cassandra about the trip to the farm, but she didn't mention that. Only when the police press her does Ashley reveal that they went to the farm because Taylor wanted to relax. During the trip, Taylor confided in her about the stress she was under from the divorce proceedings, which had affected her mental health. After some time, Taylor expressed that she was tired and wanted to go home. She called an Uber and left. Ashley reported that she hadn't seen or heard from Taylor despite making several attempts to call her. The police were aware of a money issue that Ashley was supposed to resolve but was avoiding, leading them to suspect she was hiding something. Suddenly, Ashley started mentioning a safe deposit box and money, claiming she had no knowledge of the funds being talked about. At this point, the police were confused as there was no clear information regarding the money. Police then decided to look into text messages between her and Taylor. They discovered numerous discussions about money, with Ashley frequently postponing meetings and transferring money. In the text messages, they talked about going to the bank on September 8th to withdraw money. Police requested footage from cameras near Taylor's home. After reviewing the videos, they found the women near Taylor's apartment, which matched Cassandra's earlier account. Ashley was in a car in front of the house when Cassandra left. Taylor then left the house and left with Ashley. Using geolocation, police tracked Taylor and Ashley's movements. Police reviewed surveillance footage from across the city and saw them buying beer and food, which appeared to be normal. However, no further information about their whereabouts was available after that. Inconsistencies began to appear between Ashley's testimony. However, the police decided to release her because they did not have enough evidence against her at that time. After that, Ashley contacted the police station almost daily to check on the progress of the investigation and to see if they had any new information. She wanted to help and often recounted the details of that day, as well as places where Taylor might have gone. During the conversation, she suggested that police should search alleys and talk to people who are selling illegal substances. She believed that Taylor was simply depressed and using drugs uncontrollably, and she repeatedly urged the police to follow up on this lead. She also talked about some suspicious suspects that she had seen with Taylor, despite Ashley's best efforts to appear concerned, but police are still investigating her connection to Taylor's disappearance. Video evidence shows that Ashley visited the bank after Taylor went missing. During that visit, she withdrew money from Taylor's cart. Police are particularly concerned about any potential conflict between Ashley and Taylor. Ashley had a strong motive for her actions, the $34,000 in question. It is suspected that she deliberately delayed her response because she did not want to return the money. Fearing that Taylor might report this to the police, Ashley may have decided to eliminate her friend. With Taylor missing for such a long time, there are concerns that she is no longer alive, but this needs to be confirmed. Ashley had a significant advantage. She worked for the police department and was married to a former deputy chief of the Battery Falcons. This created a difficult situation for the officers, who could not be sure of their safety while investigating her. As a result, they chose to keep the investigation secret. In October, Ashley was called in for questioning again. As the case progressed, documentary and circumstantial evidence accumulated that linked her to Taylor's disappearance. The police noticed a marked change in Ashley's behavior. She went from being outgoing and flirtatious to being withdrawn and clearly anxious. By this time, the police had verified that most of her previous statements were lies. They presented her with clear contradictions in her testimony and began investigating the cashing of hidden checks, which were likely to have forged signatures. At the very least, this could lead to accusations of fraud, but there could be darker motives behind these actions. Ashley initially claimed that she and Taylor had gone to East Milton, where they allegedly spent the day at a farm with animals. They were last seen on surveillance footage at 11:45 a.m., which was the only footage of Taylor alive during her initial interview. She was recorded on surveillance cameras in various locations throughout the day, but she was seen alone. As the police continued to talk to Ashley, she became increasingly nervous. Her answers became more confused and she struggled to explain the discrepancies in her story. The police obtained a search warrant for the farmhouse but found no evidence in the large area. They then asked about the checks to determine if they were indeed counterfeit. If the checks were genuine, that would mean that Taylor was still alive when Ashley went to the bank. But Ashley could not give a clear answer. She just said that the checks could be real. While examining the geolocation data on Ashley's cell phone, police discovered that she had been staying at Britt Road for an extended period of time. This was another farm owned by her family. In fact, they had been there for several hours before Taylor disappeared. Ashley again confirmed that Taylor was going to buy a truck from a dealership. But this time, she added new details to the story. She said that Taylor was going back to the farm. Ashley had not mentioned these details in her earlier statements, claiming that Taylor had asked her to keep the incident private. Ashley believed that Taylor was still alive and would come back, so she did not want to harm her reputation in front of the police. However, she lied multiple times, leading the police to lose trust in her. The police were very interested in the Ashley family farm in Britt Road. It was a large, isolated area that would have been a fit place to commit the crime and cover it up. During their questioning, the police noted another strange aspect of Ashley's behavior: why she did not contact the police immediately when Taylor promised to return but did not show up. It was clear that Taylor was in trouble and needed help. Although Ashley tried to show concern to the police, she made no effort to find Taylor. Why did she wait until she was called in for questioning to show concern? These questions remain unanswered, but the police believe that Ashley was withholding important information. After her trip to the farm with Taylor, Ashley frequently called the police station to check on the investigation into her friend's disappearance, especially after her initial interview. She was anxious to know if she was being considered a suspect. After her conversation with the police, Ashley realized that she was the prime suspect in the case. She decided to ask for a lawyer, which ended her visit to the police station. On the morning of October 19, 2017, Ashley returned home. That afternoon, police obtained a search warrant for the farm where she and Taylor had been staying. Specially trained dogs were deployed in the search, and within 2 hours, they discovered a suspicious burial site. It was a small pit that appeared to have been recently dug and had been covered with concrete. A human skull was found in a shallow grave, along with other remains that had been hastily buried in the dirt and construction debris. The victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the body could not be identified at the scene. However, based on clothing and jewelry, it is believed that it was Taylor. An autopsy confirmed that the body was Taylor Wright, 30. The identification was completed using dental records and DNA analysis. Ashley was arrested that evening, October 19, 2018, and charged with premeditated murder. Ashley's defense attorney believed in her innocence, but the abundance of circumstantial evidence made it challenging to convince the jury of her non-involvement in the crime. The attorney focused on Ashley's psychological profile, portraying her as sweet, pretty, and a police officer, which seemed inconsistent with being a violent criminal. Friends and family described Ashley as quiet, modest, and incapable of murder, especially when considering her physical attributes. In contrast, Taylor was physically stronger, leading the prosecution to question the defense's arguments. The lawyer developed his strategy based on the fact that the police lacked direct evidence to prove Ashley's guilt. There was no murder weapon, no witnesses, and no DNA linking Ashley to the body. This made it difficult for the prosecutor's office to connect Ashley to the crime. One witness was the victim's ex-husband, Jeff. He stated that he reached out to Ashley a few days after his Taylor went missing, trying to locate her to address some matters related to their marriage and divorce. Jeff contacted Ashley via social media, She claimed that the last time she saw Taylor was when she was exchanging money. She expressed concern about whether Taylor had arrived safely. This was a new detail that Ashley had never mentioned before, leading the police to realize that she was a pathological liar who had deceived everyone around. Although Jeff was initially investigated and cleared as a suspect due to a solid alibi, he still had a strong motive. The lawyer attempted to redirect the jury's attention to Jeff's possible involvement in his ex-wife's murder, but these efforts were unsuccessful. The testimonies from Ashley's close friends greatly influenced the jury. They revealed that the Ashley was not as she seemed. She frequently visited a strip club. Bartenders and staff stated that just before Taylor went missing, Ashley spoke negatively about Taylor. Later, a gun associated with Taylor's death was discovered in Ashley's house. After new evidence emerged, the Ashley admitted to spiking Taylor's beer with a strong substance. However, when Taylor took a sip, she noticed the drink tasted odd and clearly spoiled. She spat it out and refused to drink anymore, which likely led to the failure of Ashley's poisoning plan. Despite this admission, Ashley denied any involvement in the shooting of her friend. The prosecution argued that she had a strong motive. Ashley was holding onto a large sum of Taylor's money and was delaying returning it. Taylor desperately needed the money to pay her lawyer. So if Ashley delayed paying, Taylor would likely report the matter to the police. This situation gave Ashley a motive to get rid of her friend. The police later discovered the reason for the delay in returning the money. Ashley had been secretly having an affair with a man named Brandon without her husband's knowledge. It was revealed that she had spent all of the money on Brandon, including giving him a motorcycle just weeks before Taylor went missing. This coincided with the time she had received money from Taylor. In court, Brandon admitted that Ashley had frequently given him expensive gifts, but he did not know where she got the money, as she had no other source for such a large sum of money. The police tracked Ashley's movements and discovered that she had gone to Home Depot after Taylor went missing. The police spoke to a sales clerk who confirmed that Ashley had purchased several bags of quick-drying solution. When the substance found in Taylor's grave was tested, it matched the quick-drying compound mentioned by the hardware store employee. This suggests that Ashley attempted to quickly hide Taylor's body on the farm to avoid detection. However, Ashley's attorney argued that she was not physically able to carry the heavy bags, dig the grave, and move Taylor's body. The jury then deliberated for about 4 hours and found Ashley MacArthur guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 25 years. She also served an additional 7 years for fraud related to Taylor Wright's finances. On June 13, 1993, the Minneapolis Police Department received a call from a resident of the Minneapolis Horn Tower apartment complex. The shivering voice told the PD that there was blood in the leaking water. When police went to find the source, they discovered a woman stabbed to death in her Minneapolis apartment. The bloody crime scene itself bore evidence of cold-blooded brutal murder, but none had a clue about who the perpetrator was. So who was the monster that never hesitated to kill this woman in her own apartment? Was it some stranger who wasn't supposed to be there? Today's case takes us to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Located in the southern part, is the largest city in Minnesota. With adjoining St. Paul to the east, the city forms the Twin Cities metropolitan area. A 6-hour drive from Chicago, Minneapolis is famous for its cultural diversity, its parkway system, and the thundering cold of winter. Although Minneapolis was known for having safe neighborhoods, it would turn out not to be safe for our victim, Jean Childs. Jean N. was born in 1958 to Eugene and Betty Ekman in Asante, Minnesota. To her loving family, she was Jeannie, the apple of their eyes. However, Jean's life would not go as smoothly as her mother would have expected. Jean's emotional trauma began after her stepfather was shot dead by her uncle, who was her stepfather's business partner in 1971. Nothing was normal after his untimely demise. Jean dropped out of school in 6th grade and ran away from home numerous times. Although she came back each time after just a few days, she moved out of her mother's house when she reached her late teenage years. Soon she developed a drug addiction, and to pay for the drugs she entered into sex work. After moving to Minneapolis from her hometown of Asante, married Alfred Childs. Despite her troubled past, Jean was loved by Alfred's family. She too fell in love with them. After a hysterectomy, she was not able to conceive children, but she left no stone unturned to be a loving and caring stepmother to Alfred's 3 children from his prior relationships. However, the marriage fell apart after some time and Jean seemed to return to her previous profession. After the separation from Alfred, she started dating a guy named Arthur Gray. In 1993, they were living in an apartment unit on the 21st floor of Horn Towers on Pillsbury Avenue in Minneapolis, which was leased to Arthur. Allegedly, this was the unit that Jean used for her sex services and Arthur was her pimp. Everything seemed normal for Arthur and Jean until 1993. On June 13, 1993, a neighbor in their apartment called the police and told them about a water leakage mixed with blood in his residence. The police immediately reached the spot and upon inspection, they determined that the blood was coming from an adjacent apartment, which was Arthur and Jean's apartment. So as the police entered, a bloody crime scene was waiting for them. Inside the apartment, the floor was full of water mixed with blood. The bedroom window was open and the screen was missing. The shower was unoccupied yet left running. Investigators soon found Jean's dead body wedged between the bed and the dresser, wearing nothing but socks. She had multiple stab wounds all over her body. Blood was splattered on the walls of the bedroom, living room, and even the bathroom. This indicated that the attack was prolonged and that the attacker perhaps chased Jean all over her apartment before brutally murdering her. There was no shortage of blood evidence. Several items were taken to the lab for DNA testing, including the bedding, a towel, a washcloth, a red t-shirt, and a blood-soaked comforter. And arrestingly, while all the other items had only blood on them, the comforter had semen on it along with blood. However, the most appalling evidence for the investigators was a bloody footprint left at the crime scene near the dead body. After the crime scene examination, the body was taken to the medical examiner's office to perform an autopsy. The autopsy revealed Jean had a total of 65 stab wounds across her neck, chest, abdomen, back, hands, arms, and buttocks. It was almost everywhere on her body. The vicious attack did not even stop with this poor woman's death, as many of the stabbings were inflicted after death. One wound was so forcefully imposed that it went right through her heart, exposing her internal organs. Despite having a bucket full of genetic evidence, the investigation wasn't moving anywhere. An unidentified male profile was made from the DNA collected from the crime scene, but when they ran the criminal database, no match was found. Due to her profession, Jean used to let strangers come into her apartment every now and then, which made it impossible for the investigators to line up suspects. No witnesses ever came forward with information. Unfortunately, this case garnered little to no media attention. Without having any solid leads, this case quickly went cold and stayed so until 2015. All the while, Jean's family mourned her loss and hoped that one day justice would be served. Refusing to let go of hope, Jean's mother Betty always kept in close contact with investigators regarding the case. With a tag of horribly difficult to crack in the DNA evidence sitting in storage, this case remained one of the most brutal cases in Minneapolis. The cruelty was never in question. The question was, who did it? In order to provide answers to the family in 2015, the case was reopened in light of new DNA technology advances. In all these years, DNA technology has changed with unbelievable developments, one of them being DNA genealogy, aka tracking family trees that are generated through public profiles. This is a powerful tool that has proved to be priceless to law enforcement and solving cold cases. Although the case was reopened in 2015, it took 3 more years to discover the truth. Following the DNA trail finally led the investigators to the suspect, a Minneapolis resident named Jerry Westrom. Authorities revealed that they obtained the data from a public profile where either Westrom or a close family member of his submitted the DNA to learn more about the family members. When the police looked into the profile, Jerry Westrom was a businessman from Isanti, Minnesota. He ran a 92-acre organic farm in Cambridge in Isanti County. He was a married man with 3 children. Formerly, he owned a pair of gas stations and a Sears appliance store. Though he was a resident of Isanti from April 91 to December 93, he lived in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. At the time of Jean's murder, He was a 27-year-old man residing near her apartment. Although back in 1993, Westrum's DNA was not in the criminal database, he was no stranger to the law in the latter part of his life. In 2004, he was convicted of the misdemeanor of carrying a pistol without a permit in Isanti County and driving while impaired. He was sentenced to 90 days for the former charge and 6 months for the latter charge. In 2011, he was convicted of driving while impaired with a sentence of 1 year, which he did not fully serve. Again, in 2012, he was convicted of driving while impaired. In 2015, he was convicted of a misdemeanor for attempting to hire or engage in sex work in a public place in Stearns County, Minnesota, for which he was sentenced to 20 days in jail. In 2018, detectives had a suspect in their sights thanks to genetic genealogy testing. But they still needed more evidence to officially charge Westrum. In order to obtain a DNA sample from Westrum without his knowledge, detectives began to tail him. They got their chance when Westrum discarded a used napkin after eating a hot dog while he was accompanying his daughter to a hockey match. The DNA was taken from the napkin and sent to the lab for DNA testing. When the results came back, it was a match for Gene Killer's DNA left at the crime scene. So he was arrested in February 2019. On February 14, 2019, Jerry Westrum was charged with second-degree murder and the 1993 stabbing of Gene Childs. The next day, he posted bail of $500,000. Then, on June 25, 2020, he was indicted for first-degree premeditated murder for the same crime. 1 month later, on July 24, 2020, he pleaded not guilty to the charges. Westrum's trial began in August 2022. The defense claimed that they had the wrong man. They also pointed out the other suspect, Gene's other boyfriend, Arthur Gray. Arthur did have a reputation for being abusive, and some of his hair was also found in the victim's hand. However, after so many years have passed, Arthur is now dead. Regardless of that, the prosecution called a friend of Arthur's who testified that they were on an out-of-town motorcycle event during the murder of Gene. The prosecutors also argued that not only was Westrum's DNA matched with the attacker's DNA, but also his footprint was completely matched with the bloody footprint left at the crime scene. This evidence puts Westrum right where the murder occurred as Gene's assailant. It was also argued that the attack was moved from room to room and he had plenty of time to stop, but he did not, that he showed he really intended to murder. Westrum's family supported him throughout the court proceedings and trial. In a document, his wife said the family was forced to liquidate all assets and sell a century-old family farm to pay for his bail in defense. After just 2 hours of deliberation, a jury found Jerry Westrum guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree intentional murder of Gene and Childs on August 25, 2022. On September 9, 2022, Hennepin County District Judge Juan Oyo sentenced 56-year-old Jerry Westrum to life in prison. He will be required to serve 30 years before the possibility of parole. Family and loved ones talked about how wonderful Gene was and the lasting impact of her murder left on their lives. Gene's mother, Betty Ekman, who never lost hope, said in court, "Never thought for 1 second that it would be the last time I would talk to her and say goodbye. I've waited so many years to have this end. This has put my life through so much hell." Gene's niece, Melissa Bolo, who was just a child in '93, said, "I remember the knot in my stomach. I was crying so hard that I couldn't breathe, and I remember her laying in her casket and we were begging her, 'Please wake up.'" Gene's sister Cindy Kosnick had a statement read into the court record. "My children have grown up never knowing their Aunt Jean. I am so sorry that we never got to say goodbye. Your death has forever changed our lives." Amber Childs has fond memories of her stepmother Jean. "She was barely 4 years old when Jean passed away. I do remember she tucked me in when I was a little girl," she said. "She was like a mom to me, obviously. She was my mother once upon a time." Alfred Childs, now 84, expressed his thoughts by saying, "It took me to the twilight zone. It was really something else. Nothing was right after that. Everything was gone. Only the DNA technology made it possible to apprehend the monster who was behind this heinous act." After 30 years of waiting, Gene's family finally got justice. But this case makes us wonder, how many killers are roaming around us with a good citizen's mask? The case of Tristan Borlase. Jeffrey Borlase, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975. He was the pastor of the Conservative Baptist Bible Fellowship Church, a Protestant religious movement with Mennonite roots. Tristan was raised in an environment where personal piety was of utmost importance, and there was a constant sense of being under the strict and watchful eye of God. The foundation of his upbringing was the serious and careful study of the Bible, regular church attendance, and moral instruction. Any form of entertainment, even laughter and colorful clothing, was frowned upon. Good works, charity, missionary work, love for enemies, and the renunciation of all kinds of violence were considered virtuous. Jeffrey was raised by his father, Pastor Harry Borlase, and developed a kind, loving, gentle, and patient personality. As a young man, Jeffrey got a summer job at the Big Surf water park in Missouri. On his first day, he met Tanya, a charming and meek girl of the same age. They shared similar views and upbringings, having grown up in families where Christian values were paramount. Tanya, a patient, humble, and selfless girl, saw in Jeffrey an ideal future husband and caring father. She gave him a picture of an elderly couple holding hands, saying that would be them one day. Kathy, Jeffrey's mother, fervently prayed that God would bless her son with a wife who loved the Lord wholeheartedly. She believed her prayers were answered when Jeffrey married a young woman who shared their strong Christian faith. The newlyweds' family became a continuation of the ideals they were raised with. Tanya carefully preserved the cherished photograph of the family in their album. Soon, the young couple welcomed their first child, a delightful daughter named Taylor. Over time, 3 more children were born, the youngest being a son they named Tristan. Taylor became a caring and supportive big sister to her siblings. She was especially close with her younger brother Tristan, and they bonded over shared interests like sports, music, and mischief. The family believed that raising children meant nurturing their spiritual growth and fostering a connection with God. As the original 4 children grew older, the parents decided to expand their family by adopting 4 more boys from an orphanage, fulfilling their Christian obligation. Open, loving, and friendly to everyone, the family becomes more crowded. According to the family's religious beliefs, children were prohibited from using cell phones and social media until a certain age, and asceticism in needs and desires was encouraged. The children were prohibited from dating girls until the end of high school, that is, until the age of 18. The study of the Bible and other religious matters were mandatory. Otherwise, the children would grow up like any other child. The parents did not distinguish between their native and adopted children. They all received the same attention, care, and affection. Tanya created a harmonious atmosphere and carefully monitored the internal order and relationships between siblings. She prayed a lot and did good deeds. Jeffrey and Tanya believed that virtue should be cultivated through their own actions, and they taught their children mercy through example. When the people of Haiti were hit by a hurricane, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and sent the money to a foundation that was building homes for the victims. In exchange, she bought a simple and cheaper ring. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. This event left Tristan deeply saddened. He was left alone. Tristan had rebelled against the restrictions imposed on him since childhood and disagreed with his parents' religious beliefs. He was frustrated by the lack of a cell phone and the inability to communicate with his peers on social networks, considering such communication an integral part of modern teenage life. After Taylor's departure, conflicts with his parents became more frequent. In December 2017, there were positive changes in the family's life. Jeffrey, his wife, and their children moved to a new house with a large lot in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. The house was located on a dirt road leading into a wooded area and was significantly more spacious than their previous residence. The new home was just under 2 miles from Tanya's mother, Robin's house. The proximity made Jeffrey easy to go to her for help with the younger children whenever needed. It's unclear whether the move was a pleasant change for Tristan, as he had to change schools and environment. In Watauga, he attended the local high school and joined the track team. Other children managed to get jobs as camp counselors during the summer. At first glance, it might seem like there were no issues in the Borlase household. But that wasn't the case. Tristan's behavior became increasingly concerning over time. In 2018, the school required several consultations with a psychologist to address issues with anger management and impulsive behavior. By 2019, when Tristan was in high school, he began to struggle with certain academic subjects, despite his strong abilities. These academic difficulties only worsened as time passed. The transition had transformed Tristan from a diligent, engaged student to an indifferent, withdrawn teenager. Lost interest in his studies. Tristan started skipping classes a lot and showed no interest in learning. During lessons, he would put on his headphones and look checked out. Some teachers tried to help him, but he remained indifferent and unengaged. Tristan's behavior at home was also an issue. He often argued with his parents about getting his own phone and using social media. Tristan spent a lot of time online, and on Instagram he described himself as a musician. Closely followed her siblings' lives and noticed that Tristan frequently argued with his parents, especially his mother, about religious topics. She also learned that Tristan had other issues at school. Though Taylor tried to talk to her younger brother, the closeness they once shared had faded. After some time, Tristan befriended a girl from their religious community, Evelyn Faith Jackson. They started meeting up, disregarding the prohibition on intimate relations. Occasionally, they even smoked prohibited substances. Tristan also complained about his mother, who would discuss his behavior with him at night, leaving him tired and unable to focus in school. He was very concerned that he had many flaws that prevented him from meeting his mother's expectations and that she could not be proud of him. On April 10th, many secret things about Tristan's life came to light. Surveillance cameras were installed in the goat pen, and Tristan's old mobile phone, which he sometimes used secretly, was revealed. That day, Tanya took the phone for some reason and read text messages in which her son was having sexual conversations with girls and discussing illegal drugs with them. His parents contacted him through a family chat, informing him about information found on his old phone. That same day, Sherry King, Tristan's English teacher, called his mother to express concerns about his grades and behavior. Tristan's mother called back and stated that she and her husband would arrive at the school soon to discuss Tristan's grades with him. Sherry King then relayed this information to Tristan, who was greatly surprised by the news. Tristan's parents went to the high school to attend to what was going on. Tristan's conversation with his mother revolved around several crucial topics. They discussed the importance of academic success, maintaining appropriate relationships with girls, and the dangers of illegal drugs. His mother also expressed her preference for him to only study Christianity rather than exploring other religions. Tristan felt compelled to listen and recognized areas where he needed improvement. Together, they compiled a list of desirable qualities, such as compassion and honesty. At one point, Tristan's mother approached him from behind, placed her arm around his neck, and applied pressure. This action prompted Tristan to instinctively react, causing him to turn around and accidentally elbow his mother. According to him, his mother had never done something like that, and that's why he reacted that way. His mother was startled by the blow, grabbed what he thought were a pair of scissors from a shelf, and approached her son. He, in a state of shock at what was happening, stabbed her, believing he was defending himself, and ran to get help from his father. That day, Tristan arrived at his grandmother's, Robin, around 8:30 p.m. to pick up his younger brother, who found this unusual. Tristan explained their parents urgently needed to go to the store. 20 minutes later, another sibling called Robin, saying that he couldn't reach his parents and that they hadn't picked him up after work. Robin then called another child, Alexis, and asked her to pick up her brother, after which they agreed to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to investigate. As they approached the house, Robin saw blood on the porch. Inside, blood was everywhere. Alexis found a body under the hammock and saw Tristan with blood on his face fleeing. Alexis called emergency services, who advised the family to lock themselves in the car until the police arrived. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After waiting and talking to officers, they were taken to the station and informed that Jeffrey and Tanya had been found dead. Tristan contacted his girlfriend Evelyn and came to her place. She noticed that he seemed concerned and had some scratches on his forehead and arms. However, Tristan assured her that he had just had an argument with his parents and got the scratches from playing with his dog. Evelyn described Tristan's injuries as 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his hand, a cut on his finger, and a bruised fingernail. Tristan posted a photo of his injuries on Snapchat right after the incident, claiming he was hurt by his father's dog. His girlfriend confirmed that the photo matched the injuries she had observed on him that evening. Tristan spent the night at his girlfriend's place, and the next morning, they went to Walmart and McDonald's, initially planning to go to school, but then changed their minds. Evelyn believed that Tristan wanted to get away from his parents for some time, so she offered for him to stay with one of her relatives. Tristan agreed, and they traveled to another state. On April 11th, the sheriff's office personnel obtained access to the video surveillance system at the Borlase home. They reviewed the footage and learned the details of the crime. Police then obtained a warrant for Tristan's arrest and reported details of the vehicle he allegedly used to commit the crime to the National Crime Information Center. Inspector Matthew receives information that Tristan has been seen in Tennessee and begins the process of arresting him. Tristan was driving a car with Evelyn. He noticed blue police lights following them. He sped up in an attempt to evade the police. However, he eventually pulled over and the car was surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was confused to see her boyfriend being handcuffed and taken away in a squad car. During his interview with investigator Matthew on April 11, 2019, Tristan remained calm and cooperative. He confessed to the crime and provided a detailed account of his actions, at times becoming emotional. Tristan Borlase, a month away from his 18th birthday, was taken into custody without bail. The sheriff's office obtained a warrant to investigate Tristan's Snapchat account in 5 of his cell phones, which may have contained information related to the crime. A search warrant was also issued for the Orchard Road home, where detectives found various items, including another phone, a keyboard, a pen from a safe, paper cups, a hammer, a straw, knives, a red-stained swab, eyeglasses, a kitchen towel, a hammock, a digital video recorder, a rug, and miscellaneous papers, South Dakota cards, and boots. Additionally, a search warrant was issued for the Ford F-150 truck, and a red-stained swab, laptop, computer charger, and steering wheel cover were seized. A warrant was issued to search the home of Tristan's girlfriend in Boone, where he was spending the night. Investigators seized a pillowcase, a zippered sweatshirt, and a notebook from the house. Funeral services for Jeffrey and Tanya were held on April 17, 2019, at Bible Fellowship Church, officiated by Pastors William and Brad Gray. The children, despite the devastating loss of their parents at a young age, found the strength to write a touching obituary. Our parents never got the opportunity to live for themselves because they always lived for us. Jeffrey and Tanya have always been an incredible joy to their parents and always a source of pride. Our parents made the world a better place, and we hope to continue that legacy by passionately loving people and pursuing Jesus. After the funeral, Taylor visited her younger brother in prison for the first time and was unpleasantly struck by his behavior. Tristan not only showed no remorse, but even tried to blame the family for what had happened. It seemed to her sister that he was convinced he would regain his freedom sooner or later. Taylor felt disgusted, turned around, and left. Her second visit took place on May 11th, on Tristan's birthday. This time she came with Robin. The meeting did not differ significantly from the previous one. Her brother boasted about the celebration that had been held in his honor in the prison for his birthday. Taylor found his behavior unacceptable, especially since her parents had tragically passed away. After this visit, the family decided to cut off all contact with Tristan. According to the neighbors, they heard loud screams on the Borlase home. After the incident, Tristan returned to the house and vomited, which, according to the psychologist's opinion, indicated severe stress rather than cold-blooded, calculated murder. However, the jury disagreed with the psychologist's assessment. They had access to the forensic medical examiner reports presented at the trial. Jeffrey's autopsy report noted multiple stab wounds to his left chest and back, slash wounds to his arms and hands, as well as abrasions to his skull and forehead. Tanya's autopsy report indicated that she suffered multiple stab wounds, including to her left chest, back, and arm, as well as injuries that may have been sustained when her neck was compressed. The results suggest that the parents were defending themselves, not attacking. The psychologist concluded that Tristan Borlase was mentally sane at the time of the crime, but he was experiencing a severely impaired cognitive state, including depersonalization, derealization, and a feeling that the events were unreal. However, the court and jury rejected the psychologist's opinion, finding Tristan to be a skillful manipulator and a socially dangerous individual. The trial began on February 16, 2022. During the trial, Tristan expressed remorse for what had happened. He agreed with everything his family had said about him and supported the decision for a permanent restraining order so that the family would feel safe. On March 3rd, Tristan Borlase was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each count of first-degree murder. Hakeem Horn, the judge, acknowledged that Tristan Borlase's mental health issues were a somewhat extenuating circumstance. The psychologist's assessment revealed that Tristan was still grappling with anxiety, depression, and symptoms akin to post-traumatic stress disorder. However, the judge noted that the psychologist found no signs of psychotic disorders, although Tristan's anxiety and depression may have been exacerbated by his ongoing use of illegal substances. The most unusual fact in this story is that neither Tristan's family nor his lawyer nor Tristan himself made any statements about the motives that led to the crime. There was a devout family and a socially dangerous man who consumed illegal drugs, who did not fully understand the reasons for what happened and did not properly express the misunderstanding. On the one hand, there was a young man with low self-esteem, prone to depression, who showed signs of anxiety and did not receive the necessary qualified medical attention. Tamara Ann Hayes, known as Tammy, was born on April 13, 1973 to Steve and Nancy and lived in Yankton, South Dakota, where she also graduated high school. On September 18, 1992, 19-year-old Tammy and her boyfriend Eric were last seen at a homecoming party in Yankton at a farmhouse at 897th Road about 11:15 p.m. Around that time, several people at the party claimed that they heard yelling coming from the area of Eric's car, but no one checked it out. The next day, when Tammy didn't show up, her family reported her missing. Her body was found 5 days later in a ravine not far from the farmhouse where the party was held. She was found by a golfer searching for golf balls just across the South Dakota border into Nebraska near a golf course. The autopsy showed she had died from hyperflexion of her neck. Authorities believed the injury to be a result of foul play and said at the time evidence showed she had been in the trunk of a car and dumped in that ravine. Her estimated time of death was listed between 12:35 and 1 a.m., over an hour from the time she was last seen at the party. The autopsy also showed that due to the pooling of blood in her body, she would have been dumped in the ravine approximately 30 minutes after her death. She had multiple defense wounds and a tear in her intestinal wall, consistent with blunt force trauma. She had abrasions on her back, consistent with being dragged across asphalt. Yellow paint from the road was also found on her body. Her clothing was covered in urine from 2 different people. One urine sample was matched to Eric. Another partygoer claimed that, as a joke, he urinated in Eric's car through an open window at 11:35. Eric told police that they left the party at 10:45 and went to his parents' house. He claimed that she took off walking to her aunt's home between 12:30 and 1 a.m. and that was the last time he saw her. Several people that traveled on that road during that time period denied seeing Tammy walking. The partygoer that urinated in Eric's car stated that he saw Eric cleaning his car the next day and he assumed he was cleaning it because he had urinated in it. When Eric was asked by police about washing his car, he did not mention anything about urine. A friend of Eric stated that on the night of the party, Eric came to the restaurant that his father owned and calmly stated that, "Think I killed a girl," in the midst of their conversation. Investigators would find one of Tammy's hairs in the trunk of Eric's car, and fibers were found on her clothing that matched his floor mats. Plastic was also found on her clothing that matched plastic found in his trunk. He claimed that days before, they shared a beach towel that was in his trunk, and that is why the hair, plastic, and fibers were found. Just days before the statute of limitations would expire in 1995, police arrested Eric for her murder. He was tried on third-degree manslaughter in 1996 but was acquitted. Since the crime took place near the Knox and Cedar County line in Nebraska, the trial was set in Nebraska instead of South Dakota. The jury sent a question to the judge during their hours of deliberation about whether the crime had to take place in Cedar County, Nebraska, for Eric to be found guilty. The judge answered yes, and since prosecutors couldn't tell the jury where the alleged altercation between Eric and Tammy had taken place, he was acquitted. Judge Maurice Redmond, who presided over the trial, was rated the worst judge in Nebraska in 2004 by the State Bar Association, stating that he sometimes showed partiality in the courtroom. After his trial, Eric moved to Minnesota and got married. His wife stated that when she later found out about the trial via Facebook that she confronted him and he allegedly admitted to killing Tammy. His wife then divorced him. Sadly, Tammy's gravesite has been vandalized many times and her killer has not been brought to justice. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.